Okay, so hello everyone. I hope that you can hear me well. And welcome to the Underground. My name is Amit Chilo, and I am managing our wonderful community alongside our amazing team of volunteers and supporters. We're honored to welcome you all today. Before we will dive in with our amazing guest today, I would like to briefly introduce you to our community. We are the Web3 Devs Underground. We're a community of developers and builders founded on open source values by Shauli Rejwan and Roy Osherov. Since our inception around 4 years ago, we have consistently hosted in-person and online events, bringing together some of the brightest technical minds in the space. We are committed to delivering top-tier technical content to the global Web3 community, and we're thrilled to have you here today. To stay in the loop for future events and updates, please join our main group on Telegram, where all the important stuff is happening. And I encourage you to follow and subscribe to all our platforms. We are active on Luma, meetup.com, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can find everything on our website at web3dev.org or on the link tree on the top of the screen. Right now, this is our website, the new website, by the way. We just initiated it yesterday. So we'd appreciate it if you give it a look and give us any feedback if you have any. I want to continue with a special thanks to our community sponsor, MasterKey VC, an early stage venture capital firm focused on infrastructure and deep tech across the Web3 ecosystem. With a team of 16 world-class cryptographers and several technical experts, led by managing partner Shauli Rejwan, MasterKey operates across all major crypto hubs. And now, without further ado, let's kick off today's deep dive. So, in this event, we're going to talk about Aqua by 1inch. Today, we're basically looking at one of the biggest inefficiencies hiding in plain sight in DeFi. Most of the capital locked in AMM pools sits idle most of the time, while every new protocol fragments liquidity further. 1inch answer is Aqua, a shared liquidity layer where capital stays in the LP's wallet, and the same balance can back multiply strategies at once. That's the claim, at least. Tanner will walk us through all that and how it works under the hood. And after that, we'll dig into the trade-offs together and ask some questions. So we're thrilled to be joined today by Tanner Moore, the head of development relations at 1inch. And Tanner, feel free to correct me if I was wrong in anything in this introduction. Tanner wrote the official 1inch Go SDK and has taught 1inch workshops at IF Global events from Taipei to Prague. Did I say it right?
Pretty close.
Awesome. So, Tanner, welcome to the Underground. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So feel free to introduce yourself, even though I hope I did at least some justice to the introduction.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Tanner. I've been on various teams across 1inch for the past 5 or so years now. And like you said, I've gone to many hackathons. I do a lot of community engagement with talks like this and sharing our technology and trying to get people engaged and building on top of our platform. So yeah, I think you did a pretty good job.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So feel free to share your screen. I'll drop off to not bother you too much during the call. If there is anything, I'll just jump and try to help if needed. But yeah, I'll be back on the Q&A part.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. So feel free to share your screen.
Okay. Let's give it a go. Share.
By the way, to everyone joining us, feel free to ask questions on the comments. Once we get to the Q&A part, we'll try to ask all of these questions. I'll try to do it justice. But yeah, we can see it mostly from YouTube, but I guess from anywhere.
Okay, awesome. Can you see my screen all right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, good luck, Tanner. Thank you, man.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everybody. I guess we can just jump right in because we had a pretty good intro done already. This talk is called Reimagining the AMM with 1inch Aqua. It'll be about 20-ish minutes long. And then as discussed a moment ago, there will be time for questions, and I will do my best to give everybody solid answers and insight into the tech at 1inch. So let's jump right in. So today we're going to talk briefly about the current landscape of DEXs. This will likely be mostly review to most listeners. We will talk about what Aqua is and how it reimagines AMM design. We will talk about tools we've built to streamline Aqua development. We will then talk about how we can extend this tech beyond just AMMs, and then we'll wrap up with the benefits for LPs, traders, and builders alike. So let's start off with an example of Bob, the LP, who wants to make money off of his Ether and USDC tokens. He will go to some existing AMM, and he will look at a protocol that looks acceptable to him. Let's just assume he chooses Uniswap because of their position in the ecosystem, and he is interested in their wrapped Ether and USDC pair. He will put his tokens into a pool on Uniswap, their wrapped Ether USDC pair, and those tokens will sit on this contract. Then another trader comes by, let's call her Alice, and she has Ether and she wants USDC. She goes through the ecosystem and eventually finds this pool where Bob is an LP of, and she sends her Ether into this pool and she gets her USDC back, just like she wanted. She's happy. Bob earns a small fee for providing liquidity to this pair. Bob's happy, and both go on their way. But obviously, there is a lot more than just the Uniswap AMM. There is Curve, there's SushiSwap, there are many, many more. And Alice in the past had to figure out, where do I actually want to go to swap my tokens? Where's the best place to do this? And that was not really an easy problem for her to solve back in the day. But as many of you know, there were these tools called aggregators that came out. 1inch's original product market fit was our aggregator, where we kind of abstract all of that complexity away from Alice's perspective. And we just say, hey, just come to us. We will go find the best place for you to trade your tokens. And you no longer have to worry about any of that complexity. It's just a one-stop shop to get the tokens that you want. Now, this was great for Alice because it made the liquidity feel very unified to her. She did not have to worry at all about how complicated it actually was behind the scenes with all these AMMs kind of stacking against each other and competing with each other. But in reality, this design of aggregators really allowed the fragmentation to accelerate because it kind of solved the problem of getting users into a new DEX. And this made problems worse in other areas. Contracts for re-implementing custody, accounting, settlement. They were either rewriting it from the ground up. Maybe they were just forking it from the existing popular protocols. Maybe they were forking it and then making small modifications to it over time. And we just continued to see this bloat kind of in the ecosystem behind the scenes. So we'll talk about drawbacks, not really from Alice's perspective, because that largely got solved when it comes to trading on chain, but really from the LP's perspective, because that's the part that people really don't talk about nearly as much because it's not the user-facing side in some ways. So the first drawback for LPs inside of the existing DEX landscape is choosing where to deposit the liquidity really sucks. So if Bob has a token pair and he's going through all of the different DEXs, he has to try to figure out which one has the best balance of security and yield. And that's not an easy problem to solve. You have to kind of go to all the websites. You need to look. You need to find analytics websites that are checking on what the current yield is, what the average yield is. It's a very complicated problem to solve. And the second is actually being an LP and participating in this space also has a high opportunity cost. So if Bob says, oh, you know what, I think I like Uniswap, I'll just go with the tried and true, he puts his tokens into Uniswap and no longer has access to the potential yields of any other DEX in the entire ecosystem. Additionally, if the token pair he had wasn't USDC Ether, but instead Aave Ether, now by locking his tokens up in the Uniswap contract, he potentially loses access to DAO governance because a lot of DAO governance uses the token balance on your wallet to give you voting rights for all the upcoming changes to the protocols. Another one is moving funds between DEXs is generally high friction. When Bob first puts his funds into Uniswap, he needs to be making sure that he's talking to the right contract. Ideally, he's going to be simulating his deposit with some sort of tool like Tenderly to make sure that what happens is what he expects to happen. And once those tokens are there, he has to do the entire thing in reverse And then once he finds the new DEX where he wants to increase his yield, he goes through that same process again, checking the website for docs, making sure they're official, verifying the contracts, simulating the transaction. There's a lot of steps there if somebody's being very security conscious with their balances. And if they have very large balances, you would expect them to do this every single time. And again, if he leaves Dodo, he continues to repeat this process. And lastly, new projects continually increase fragmentation in the ecosystem. And in fact, they materially incentivize it. So companies will either do boosted yields, or protocols will either do boosted yields when they first launch. They might do some sort of emission schedule with their governance token. They're kind of actively trying to strip liquidity from the existing LPs that are already in the ecosystem to get more liquidity into their DEX on their side. So if we started out with 4, 5, 6, it just keeps growing. And as this continues to grow, Bob has to continue figuring out where is the actual proper place to park his funds. So a lot of these drawbacks so far that we've talked about all kind of center around this model that everybody is used to of there being this AMM in between Bob and Alice. There's some sort of contract that's holding these funds and making this entire thing possible. So what 1inch tried to do was say, hey, is there a way to build this a system that mimics what we understand with AMM design and mimics the experience of AMM design, but actually has the funds going fluidly between maker and taker directly? So if Alice were to trade in this system we're describing now, it would actually go all the way to Bob with her Ether, and the Bob's USDC would go all the way back to Alice, even though it looks like an AMM, but isn't quite that design that everybody's used to. And that is where 1inch Aqua was kind of born. So with 1inch Aqua, the liquidity, it always stays in the LP's wallet. There is no contract that you actually have to park your funds in anymore. It stays in your wallet until the moment it's actually needed for a swap. Liquidity is not bound to any trading strategies. While you're participating in the Aqua ecosystem, you can swap the tokens out of your wallet if you want to. You can send them to a centralized exchange. You can sell them, whatever you want to do. You're not actually materially bound to the Aqua protocol. You're just participating in it. And most importantly, settlement is still atomic. It is still the same experience that people are used to with AMMs. It's just a whole new design from the perspective of the LPs. So now let's talk briefly about the architecture of Aqua. There are 3 main components. There is the Aqua router, there are Aqua apps, and there are strategies. And we're going to go through each one now. So the Aqua router is an 80-line smart contract, and it is responsible for 3 core functions. LP registrations, so what wallets are actually participating in the protocol. Balances, how much of each token are they participating with. And swap settlement. It is the contract that actually has the rights to take tokens out of your wallet to give them to users who are swapping against your funds. Aqua apps are the swap logic implementations themselves. So think constant product, think concentrated liquidity, think stable swap. This is the actual price curves and math being used to swap tokens between 2 parties. And finally, the strategies. These are the actual LP commitments to a specific Aqua app. So think an LP is committed to the constant product Aqua app, and their strategy is wrapped Ether USDC with a balance of 1 Ether and 1500 USDC. Or maybe a stable swap Aqua app with USDT and USDT pairs and 1,000 of each token. So if we go back to the example we went through earlier of the Bob and Alice swapping between a USDC and Ether pair, now let's kind of go through this process inside of the Aqua ecosystem. So now between Bob and Alice, we have the Aqua router, that 80-line smart contract we referenced earlier, and the constant product AMM Aqua app. So, excuse me. So initially, Bob will either approve or sign a permit that will give the Aqua router access to his funds. He will then call the function on this router called aqua.ship. And when he calls aqua.ship, he will define which Aqua app he's interested in using, which tokens he wants to use within that Aqua app, and their balances. And all of this will be stored inside of the internal state of the Aqua router contract. Once this internal state is written, there will be an emit event where this strategy data is broadcast out, and this will get picked up by anybody who wants to listen for it. In this case, we'll be talking about the 1-inch indexer that will be used to track all of these strategies, and all the information that is now inside the Aqua router will be stored off-chain as well and captured by 1-inch to be served up to users later. Now, when Alice wants to trade tokens, she can get this information from the indexer, and she can then go to the Aqua app and she can get a quote. She can say, hey, I know about Bob in this system. I have Ether. I'd like to get USDC out. How much can you offer me? If she likes what she sees, she will then send her Ether in just like she would to any other AMM. This Aqua app will then reach out to the Aqua router and it'll say, hey, Alice is talking about this LP Bob. These are the parameters for what he's providing to this Aqua app. Is this all legitimate? And if the Aqua router can confirm this is legitimate and Bob has committed to this strategy, it will reach in with the permissions he granted earlier. It will send the Ether into his wallet. It will pull the USDC out, and it'll push that all the way back out to Alice. Alice gets her USDC. Bob gets his fees, just like in the traditional AMM design, but those funds stayed on Bob's wallet the entire time. So what do we get with this new design? It's obviously a lot more complicated. So what are the actual benefits of it? Well, LPs, as we mentioned earlier, can sell and send committed tokens whenever they want. Again, in this whole system you just saw, the funds were always on Bob's wallet, and he could send them and do anything he wanted to do with those tokens at any point in time. There was no on-chain hard commitment to those tokens being bound to those strategies. LPs now get the rights to participate in governance that still use the model of snapshots and token balances inside of their wallets. And maybe the third, and by far the most important, is LPs can reuse these tokens for other Aqua apps and strategies. And that's what we're going to start talking about next. So if we look at Bob and we say, well, actually, let's give an example where Bob has 4 tokens, okay? He has Ether, USDC, Aave, and Tether. And he has exactly $1,000 of each of these, just to make the example very simple. So in his wallet, he actually has $4,000 total of liquidity. If he goes to the Aqua router and he says, hey, I want to provide liquidity for this pair, Ether USDC, he can do that. We already talked about that before as registering that with the Aqua router. And it's $1,000, $1,000 each, so $2,000 in this token pair. He can then again say, well, I actually want to provide liquidity for Ether and Aave. So another $2,000 of liquidity, $1,000 his entire balance of Ether, and $1,000 his entire balance of Aave. And then he can also do a third strategy where he does the exact same thing with his entire balance of Ether and his entire balance of Tether. So even though Bob's total liquidity is $4,000, he now has created an effective liquidity of $6,000. So if Alice comes through in this same example and says, I would like to trade my USDC for Ether, she can talk to that same Aqua app that Bob has registered with, and she can trade and get Ether back. Tony can also come in and trade Aave into the same Aqua app, and it will go against Bob's Ether Aave pair, and he can get Ether back. And a third trader named Craig can come through and do the exact same thing with Tether and trade Tether for Ether from Bob's balance. Now, there is a caveat here, which is if multiple traders in the same block are swapping large balances. So let's say both of these traders are trying to get basically the entire Ether balance out of a swap with Bob's wallet. One of those will obviously fail because Bob doesn't actually have enough Ether to satisfy all these trades. So if there's very high volumes of conflicting trades, there will be reverts occasionally. So we've talked about an Aqua app with constant product, but again, you could do an Aqua app with concentrated liquidity, an Aqua app with stable swap. You would have a lot of different trading strategies all written as standalone Aqua apps. And there would obviously be a lot of overlap here because at the end of the day, a lot of these AMMs, the only difference is the price curve, the actual math of how you're calculating the tokens in, tokens out. And so we decided that when we were going to launch 1-inch Aqua, we would launch a parallel product with it called Swap VM. And this in and of itself is an Aqua app, but it aims to abstract away and standardize a lot of things like settlement, deposits, all of the boilerplate code that ends up being rewritten over and over and over and forked over and over and over as new swap strategies are created inside the ecosystem. So simply put, Swap VM is just building block functions for swaps. So you could stack a function that defines a price curve with a function that defines taker restrictions if you want to do limit orders or OTC trades. You can stack your fees either at the beginning of this block or at the end, depending on where you want to calculate fees. You can do deadlines if you want to have these orders actually expire at some point in time. It's really, truly building blocks to define a swap strategy without you having to re-implement everything in Solidity. So don't worry about reading all of the code here. The point of explaining the differences in these two products inside of the Aqua ecosystem on this slide is to look at the left side, which is constant product written as a raw Aqua app. So you can see the price quotes and swap logic are all their own Solidity functions written in a .sol file. And on the right side, we see the exact same strategy written in swap VM. And you'll notice that even though the left side is Solana, even though the left side is a .sol contract written in Solidity, the right side is actually just using our SDK written in JavaScript, because swap VM is actually a VM. And so what you're describing is the bytecode of this application. You're not deploying a new contract anymore. Swap VM is the contract, and it will interpret this bytecode as you define it in the SDK, or if you want to use Solidity, you can, and then you simply compile that into bytecode, and that's what you actually send into the swap VM. So as we said, building blocks inside of the swap VM are actually just opcodes. So these are really functions inside of this very limited narrow scoped VM for swapping. One additional detail is you can call external contracts if your swap strategy needs additional data. For example, something like getting oracles, right? That's not going to natively be inside of swap VM. So we did want to make a way for people to kind of build things where they need data that goes outside the swap VM ecosystem. Additionally, Aqua can extend far beyond AMMs. That was our main goal, but there's actually a lot more that you can do besides just building AMMs with this new structure. You can build prediction markets, you can build privacy pools, you can build flash loans. And in fact, all of these products have been built at hackathons that we participated in, where we encouraged people to experiment with Aqua and Swap VM and try to make the coolest things they can. So it really does go far beyond AMMs. It's just a matter of how people want to do it and what they want to build on top of it. So if we go back to our example earlier, where we talked about the constant product AMM Aqua app, let's swap that out a little bit to describe what it would look like if you built flash loans instead. So Bob's still an LP, but now he's just providing USDC, and there is a flash loan Aqua app that he's interacting with. Alice, when she learns about his balance, she would send in the borrow amount plus payload into the flash loan app and say, hey, I want to use Bob's liquidity for this activity I'm trying to do. Just like before, this flash loan app would go into the Aqua router. It would verify Bob's commitments. And once it finds out that those are actually true, it would pull that USDC out to the app layer. The app layer would then execute the flash loan payload, just like you would in a traditional flash loan system. It would send the USDC back to Bob at the end of the transaction with the fee attached to it. And then Alice gets to accomplish whatever she was trying to do with that app. So we've talked about flash loans. We've talked about constant product with token pairs. This obviously extends to things like stable swap, where you can have 3 or more tokens together. And all of these different strategies can be accessed by a single LP all at the same time, accessible to the broader Ethereum and smart contract community, or I should say Ethereum and EVM community, because that's where we're launched right now, all at the same time, earning fees across all 3 or as many strategies as Bob wants to be a part of. So lastly, we will briefly talk about just what this means for the DeFi market in general. For liquidity providers, this means a much, much higher utilization of funds, which means better yields for everybody who wants to provide liquidity into the ecosystem. For DeFi users, this means just better prices for DeFi apps, lower price impact on swaps, lower fees for flash loans, anything you can think of. It's just going to be more efficient, which is going to push that cost down for people who want to interact with the ecosystem. And for builders, this means a fast path to production. They don't have to build everything from scratch anymore. And in fact, they'll eventually get access to a large group of users as well for building on top of this ecosystem. So that is everything for me. I know it was a bit of a crash course, and there's probably a lot of questions that you might have, since that's a lot of information. So yeah, I invite anybody who wants to ask questions in the chat or however you interact, and I will be happy to do my best to answer all of them. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanner. This was a quick crash course, so I have some questions, but
yes.
I feel like it was a great crash course to kind of wrap my head around everything. So
Yeah,
thank you so much for that. Maybe we'll start with some questions from the audience, then I'll jump to the questions from our team.
sure.
So I'll bring the first question here on the screen. Okay, Ben asks, so how do you set the price? Same as any other XY, X times Y equals K, AMM, or something else?
I don't know exactly what. So if you do the Aqua app, the raw Aqua app version, you implement that however you want. If you want to use the version that is on Swap VM, it is just set at the function level. I don't know exactly what that looks like on the Swap VM side, but I would assume it would be exactly how you'd expect it. And then if you wanted to build your own Aqua app that just hooks into the Aqua router directly, you have complete control over that. So however you want to implement that is fine.
Okay, awesome. Next question. We have another one from Ben. So let's continue with Ben first. So why wouldn't there be a price impact there?
There would be price impact. So the same limitations of traditional dexes still apply. There's no magic bullet for that side. But what you get is people to get all the benefits of not locking their funds up somewhere. And you also get the benefits of people who want to have access to multiple strategies at once instead of just a single strategy. So price impact, if you were to be involved in a ton of strategy at the exact same time, would be amplified. So there would be more risk from that side as well. But again, this is for people who want to manage their risk and try to optimize their yield. But if you subscribe to 1,000 strategies with your balance, yeah, you'd be extremely exposed to price impact if the prices of your token pairs changed dramatically.
Okay. Next question is from I think Ayal. So, is there a way to add KYC restrictions controlling who can swap with who?
Yes, a good way you could do that is you could create your own KYC system that has like NFTs that your team gives out. And then you would make it where if people want to interact with your Aqua app, there would just be a check inside of your Aqua app for that NFT. So you could basically do like a hybrid KYC on-chain NFT system where you are kind of injecting your own checks with the people you've basically white labeled to be allowed to use your Aqua app. So that's totally supported. And I've seen that pattern used before. Not in Aqua, but I've seen it used just on chain before. And that's totally valid inside of Aqua as well.
Okay, super cool. So I guess now is time for our questions. I'll start maybe with the more technical questions about the session itself. And then I would love to jump to some questions about you, your journey, and how you got into where you're today.
Sure.
So let's maybe start with the short opener. So just a sec, I'll bring this in front of me if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries.
So you opened by showing that aggregators made liquidity feel unified to the users, while fragmentation actually accelerated, if I understand correctly. And 1inch is one of the biggest aggregator there is. So is Agua an admission that aggregation treated the symptoms, not the disease? And if so, like what took the 6 years of work on that?
I think what we have created with Aqua is really just a natural evolution of AMM design. So I guess you could see it that way at the time, but that's where the market was. I don't think if Aqua was released back then, it would have been as well received. And to be honest, it's kind of a pretty interesting idea. And I think if somebody thought of it earlier, they would have been happy to do it earlier. But at the time, there was just a need. There was a very obvious need that the founders of 1inch saw. And sure, they were treating a symptom. And yeah, maybe Aqua is the solution to all of these problems, but we just have to take things one step at a time. So I think it's a natural time for like the next evolution of dexes to be released. And I think old dexes will stick around, which makes our old aggregator product will probably always be relevant as long as DeFi is around. So I see them as complementary to each other for sure. Simplicity versus complexity.
Awesome. I like that answer. We have another question from the audience. So I'll stop for that. Can you elaborate a little bit more about Bob with the $4,000 liquidity can provide $6,000 liquidity? It sounds like virtual reserves or leverage. And yeah.
It's leverage in the sense that you have more price impact, which kind of goes back to one of the questions that was asked earlier. So to go a little bit more into that, Bob is committing tokens to a specific strategy, but he's not like binding them. It's not like rehypothecation or anything, because like I did in the showed in the last slide, is if multiple people try to use all of his liquidity at the same time, the second person that transaction or in that block would get a revert, because the liquidity isn't really $6,000 liquidity, but if used out of sync or asynchronously, or I should say not simultaneously, then all of that liquidity effectively is there for users. So it's not like he actually has $6,000 of availability for people, but in a world where not all of that is used all the time, it feels that way to users, because they don't need to know about the other places that he's committing his capital. They just need to know what he's willing to let them do at any given moment in time. So it feels like 6,000, but it's actually 4,000. And in times of high congestion or high contention, there would be reverts, which obviously wouldn't be the best UX, but that will not be happening the majority of the time. The majority of the time, people interact with a portion of his $4,000, and they don't need to know about the total 6,000. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter to them, because they're just using his money where it matters to them. So in a way, it's like a reimagination of just-in-time liquidity, but kind of a totally different angle coming at it.
Okay.
If that doesn't make sense, feel free to ask it again. I'll try to explain it in a different way.
Yeah, guys at home, feel free to continue asking questions. I'll stop to try to give your questions a place as much as possible. And I see Ben asked another question, so let's jump in right with that. So what would you say Aqua's top advantages and disadvantages are?
Its top advantages is, if this system grows like we think it will, this will give objectively better yields for liquidity providers. So its advantage is, depending on where you look at it from. So if you look at it from the perspective of an LP, its advantage is that it can give you much higher yields than what you're used to today, because you can reuse this capital over and over and over, and all the strategies that you decide are interesting and worth your time and worth your effort. The disadvantages is definitely complexity. This is a much more complicated system. It's not nearly as straightforward as Uniswap was when it first launched, which I think kind of helped it, because everybody could really wrap their heads around what Uniswap was. I mean, I remember when I first read about an AMM, it made sense. I mean, the math didn't really make sense, but the concept made sense. And I think Aqua is many layers of complexity built up over, half a decade of understanding what's going on in this ecosystem. So the complexity is probably the biggest disadvantage, and the increased yield is better. Oh, and then the other one is, if Aqua catches on like we hope it does, this will result in just way deeper liquidity for people. So like DeFi will just become more efficient because there's more capital in the right places at the right times.
Okay, great. So if you don't mind, I'll continue with a few of my questions.
Yeah,
Guys,
please do.
Feel free to continue asking us in the comments. Okay, my question is that you showed one revert with two traders on one wallet. At production scale, hundreds of strategies overlapping wallets. What reverts rates are you seeing, and how should a router price that risk, basically?
So we're still in developer preview, so we don't have a lot of volume yet at all. It's really just trying to get the tech out there, showing people what we've built. We want to see what people can build. Like I said earlier in the presentation, we're going to a lot of hackathons, trying to get teams kind of rallied up to try to build things and make cool projects on this. So we haven't seen a lot of production data yet. We will find out over time what those are, obviously, but I don't have any numbers yet.
Yeah, totally makes sense. But I hope our community can help with that as well. Any devs in the audience, feel free to jump in and try that. Okay, the next question, just a sec. Okay, there was a great headline, but the complexity just moved, if I understand correctly. It moved into the apps, the VM programs, and the indexers. So what's the real trusted surface a maker needs to evaluate, and how much of it is actually audited right now?
So the strategies that people make, the Aqua apps that people make, will need to be audited. So if you make a raw Aqua app, that needs a smart contract audit, just like anything else does. But there are protections for users, just like our aggregator has protected people. Like our aggregator has never been hacked. And one of the reasons for that simply is, at the end of a swap, the conditions of that swap has to be met before it can actually commit to a user's wallet. And it's the same thing with Aqua. So users are largely protected with the Aqua router, making sure that everything is safe. But if you write your own deployed Aqua app, you still need to audit it to make sure that everything's good. If you use Swap VM, you don't need to audit the smart contract layer because that's taken care of on the Aqua side, but you do need to audit the implementation that you've done of the Swap VM bytecode. So there still is auditing that needs to be done by the developers, and there still is some risk with people who are submitting to these strategies. A really good example is like, what if it's just a terrible strategy and has just tons of price impact or really thin liquidity, right? There are still risks that can happen with funds. So people do need to be careful. It's not free, but it is a better system that hopefully people will like.
Okay, great. Next one, you mentioned Swap VM opcodes can call external contracts via Oracle data. That puts Oracle trust inside the settlement path of someone's personal wallet. What's the trust model, basically, and how and what happens to a maker whose strategy prices off a manipulated feed or something like that?
That's a great follow-up question. I think that actually validates your previous question. So if there was just a totally malicious Oracle, that would be an attack vector. Because if it's saying the price is completely false of some token, that would totally mess up the outcome. So I think that's a great example of the risk that actually can exist in the system. And you're right, adding an Oracle does add risk, and people need to evaluate that when they're committing to these strategies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next the flow starts with approve versus permit to the Aqua router. In practice, that is sending allowance to one contract. On every chain you deploy to, one contract on any chain you deploy to. On March 2025, deprecated Fusion version 1 contract cost a solver $5 million. Why should this room believe a standing allowance to Aqua is safer than pooled custody? And what's the blast radius, basically, if a router or an app is ever wrong?
So part of the reason that the Aqua router was designed to be so simple was try to make it as bulletproof as possible, which is why it's just a simple 80-line contract. But you're totally right. The amount you approve for that contract would be what could be compromised, the same way, a Uniswap pool would be compromised if with your balance that's inside of that. So in a doomsday worst case scenario, it's still the same blast radius, but we tried to make the Aqua router level, the part you actually approve against, as completely tiny and audited as we possibly can to limit this exact concern with users.
Awesome. And as a user, you have any recommendation on how to do that more safely or like in a better way?
I would say to only use Aqua apps that have been audited or maybe whitelisted by us. We don't quite know how we're going to advertise these applications as people built them, but you definitely do not want to just be jumping in and using an Aqua app as soon as it gets launched. You want to see, have people done audits? Have people had security teams look at it? Is it promoted by people like 1inch directly? Like, definitely use your judgment as you start to dip your toes in this ecosystem because it's so new. And yeah, don't just go subscribing to everything blindly because you're optimizing yield, because you don't want that much exposure to all these apps as they get launched.
Okay, thank you. Next one is the question about the flash loans. Personally, I think it's very interesting, but let's say beyond the AMMs was, I think, the most surprising slide in the deck. And flash loans, where you can borrow when the borrower comes straight out from Bob's wallet. In this case, mid transaction. If you can walk us through Bob's side of that thing, like what does he earn? What is worst case, and does he even know what is happening while it's happening?
So I've never looked at the implementations of flash loans like intricately, but my understanding would be that the actual app, the flash loan app, just has a condition that says the transaction at the end, the entire balance plus some predefined fee has to go to Bob's wallet. So I think the short answer is Bob probably doesn't know or care what's happening with the funds once he lends them out, but the contract itself will protect the funds going back at the end of the transaction. So flash loans, by definition, you don't really trust them with your funds. You literally just give them access to it within a specific transaction, and that transaction literally cannot commit unless the funds go back with interest to the original caller. So this would just be Bob saying, hey, I have 10,000 USDC. If people want to use that for flash loans, I charge, like 100 USDC if you want to use the full balance in any given transaction. And then the contract itself will enforce the fact that at the very end of it, it has to go back into his wallet. So it would be very similar to existing flash loan contracts that are already out there today.
Okay, great. My next question is about Aqua and Fusion. The obvious end state is your own resolver filing Fusion orders against Aqua strategy, I guess. Market maker inventory that never leaves the wallet. Is this something that is live today? And if not, what is blocking it, or when it is planned?
So yes, Fusion resolvers will likely end up using Aqua. Our aggregator will also use Aqua because this is just going to give people more access to ways of swapping. So I don't actually, what exactly, can you reread the question for me? Sorry.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll try to read it a bit slower for me as well. So the obvious end state is your own resolver filing Fusion orders against Aqua strategies. Market maker inventory that never leaves the wallet. So basically, is this thing up to date or not? And if so, what's blocking it?
Okay. Yes. The only thing that's blocking it is just liquidity. So this is technically on-chain and live and can be used. We just need it to kind of start getting Aqua apps liquidity in there. And as soon as that's available, that will start being used by the Fusion resolvers, in our aggregator, like I said. So the only thing blocking it is just getting this out there and starting to get developers and users on it. But it's ready to go as soon as it starts to grow and has enough liquidity to fill trades.
Awesome, that's super cool. Okay, next question is more on the developer side. Developer release was, I think, in November. There's a DAO incubator, a bounty program, and the bounties at the end that you showed. So tell us about the results a little bit. How many Aqua applications or strategies have shipped from teams outside of 1inch? Maybe any market makers running this on real size now? And yeah, if you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we do have a grants program that we have for people who are building on top of us. Most of the teams we're talking to right now came out of our hackathon. So people who did well in our hackathon, we kept contact with them. We gave them the way to interact with our DAO to try to get grants. I personally know of maybe 2 or 3, but I'm not the only person talking to these teams who are currently seeking funding and currently actively building on top of them. There is one project that was one of our hackathon winners. They're called Aqua Zero. They actually had a booth at one of the last events we were at. So we're starting to see teams really start to grab onto this technology and try to build something cool on top of it.
Awesome. And what would you guys like most from, at least from our community or from developers? Where is the bottleneck right now? Where should they try to join around that? Yeah, like the docs, the tooling, the trust or demand layer.
There should be an Aqua page on 1inch.com. If not, all of our repos are on our public GitHub, just the 1inch GitHub. We have access to, between the website and our GitHub, we have access to or published our white papers for both Aqua and SwapVM. We have SDKs live, so people can build those now. The contracts are also live, published with audits. So all this stuff is accessible and people can build today. They can build today with everything available. It's still technically in developer preview. We do not have like an official Aqua page yet, but ideally that will be coming toward the end of this year. No hard dates yet, but that's what we're kind of aiming for to fully launch this as a live product.
Okay, awesome. And after the event, feel free to share the link in our group so developers can access it easily.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah, I'll invite you there right after that. Next question is, you showed one revert with two traders on one wallet, at the production scale. I think I already asked this one. Just a sec. No. Yes, I already asked this one. Okay, I think I'll ask one last technical question, and then we'll jump to the question about you.
Sure.
So I'll let you choose what you prefer. The protocol type questions, founders and builders, or something else.
I don't know. Whatever's fine. I'm fine with
Whatever. Okay, so you've made the case that, for Agua, like basically all of the event was good reasons to use Agua.
it.
Give us like one of the strongest arguments against wallet permissioned liquidity. Um, like the version where pools win and Agua ends up as a niche tool or for professional market makers. What's the most likely reason this can like not work or fail?
Hmm.
And what would change your mind about it?
It's a good question. I think the Aqua apps on Aqua, like these LPs that exist inside of the Aqua apps, it's not nearly as discoverable as a simple pool would be or a simple AMM would be. You need to go through an indexer of some kind to get access to these. So they're not quite as naturally discoverable, I think, as pools would be on like a big DEX like Uniswap or something. You kind of need to be using like intent-based swapping or aggregator-based swapping to really get the benefits of this. So maybe it wouldn't catch on because it's a little bit harder to actually find this liquidity without using some sort of other tool that helps track it down and keep tabs on where all these different pools are. Because you can imagine, I mean, once Aqua gets bigger, there would be 10,000s to hundreds of thousands of liquidity providers or liquidity pools, and you basically need some sort of layer to help feed that information to you, which makes it a little less accessible than traditional DEXs. And also users might just want to stay with their traditional concept of AMMs as well. Because again, this is a newer concept. Maybe DeFi is already kind of on the decline and this doesn't pick up because there just isn't that much activity anymore, I guess. We'll just have to see what happens over time. I think mathematically it is a really cool tool. So I would like to see it succeed because I really do think it benefits all parties equally.
Okay, awesome. We have a few more questions from the audience, and then I'll jump to the personal ones. So next one from Eyal again. Can a swapper know in advance the exact exchange rate they're agreeing to?
The answer to that is definitely yes. This, from the user's perspective, will feel just like an AMM. So they will call a quote method on it. They will get some sort of agreed upon rate, and that's what they will send in when they actually make the call. So you can use simulators to verify this, or you can just kind of trust the contracts, but it will be the same flow when it comes to getting a quote and actually executing on that quote, just like people are used to today.
Okay, and I guess a few follow-ups on that. So specifically, what happens if mid-swap uncommented liquidity vanishes due to a parallel swaps executing against the same pool, wallet restrictions or similar factors?
This would be a revert. So if the liquidity disappears because the LP like removes it, or if the liquidity dries up because somebody pulled their liquidity in a swap before you, or maybe a different strategy that took the liquidity from that LP before you, you would just see a revert. So no funds are at risk, basically. You'd still be agreeing to terms of what the min return value is.
Okay, last question from Eyal. Wouldn't that invalidate the price? I think it's touching the same point.
Yeah.
Okay.
The short answer is yes. Yes, your concern is correct, but we'll see in practice how often that happens. I think it'll be okay.
Okay. Next question from Ben. Okay, what's happening when my swap requires more than one participant, aka LP liquidity?
Oh, I see what you're saying. That is one of the reasons that these swaps will be done through an aggregator. So if you have a trade where you're trying to swap 1,000 USDC for DAI, let's say, and the best rate that you can find, or the best rate that's found for that swap, is using 3 Aqua LPs and not just one, because there's not enough to do it in just one, it would be the same exact flow that happens today with our aggregator. So we will calculate the best way for you to get that swap through. There won't be partial fills or anything. At least I don't think there'll be partial fills. But the mental model to use right now is just treat each LP as if it's its own completely unique DEX that an aggregator is routing through. So if your $1,000 swap goes through 10 LPs to actually complete it, that's perfectly fine. It'll just increase how much gas is used. But gas right now on Ethereum is basically free, so I don't think it's going to be a concern.
Okay. 2 last questions from the audience. You gave an example of one account providing tokens. How does it work when multiple accounts providing the same token pairs? And does it split each trade?
That's a great question. So in the actual ecosystem, the LPs all stand completely on their own, because remember, there are no pools anymore. There's just a group of people who are providing tokens for a given price curve or a given strategy. So don't think of your swap as going through the Aqua app directly. Think of it as the Aqua app defining how that liquidity will be swapped between you and the LP. And the aggregator or whoever's feeding you those trades will actually go into each LP as if it was its own AMM. So there is no pool, there's no splitting the trades across them. The indexer will actually just say, hey, for your swap to happen, even though there's 100 people providing the exact same price curve at the exact same token pair, we're going to have your swap go through these 5 people who gives you the best rates, and you'll individually be routed through all of those 5 people in one transaction. So again, it's much better to think of this as each individual wallet and each strategy as its own completely isolated AMM that is intelligently routed to with an aggregator layer, which would, potentially be 1, 2, 10, 100 different LPs all in one transaction, letting your trade go through.
Okay, last audience question. If Bob commits 1 ETH, do you monitor Bob's ETH balance to ensure there is 1 ETH available, or does that check only happen when a transaction tries to access Bob's commitment?
It will only happen at the moment that it tries to access it, because otherwise there'd be this ridiculous pinging system that's trying to constantly keep everybody's balance in check. So if it does not have the liquidity at the time of the swap, that's when you'll learn. It'll be a revert there. Again, we'll see if that's a problem. Maybe there'll be a system where the indexers are blacklisting balances until they change. So if somebody swaps against Bob's ETH and it's not there anymore, maybe at that point the indexer will say, oh, that trade reverted. Okay, this one's been kicked out of the indexer until the balance changes again. So it'll be on the burden will be on the indexer to make sure that these balances are correct, and there's no proactive checking, at least not planned yet, and certainly not on chain. It would be the indexers that are taking care of all this checking.
Okay, so we got to my favorite part, I think. So I would like to hear a little bit about your journey as Tanner. So before 1inch, you were at Bitly, if I am not mistaken, and before that, you've been 5 years in cybersecurity, in Logarithm. What did you do before joining the Web3 ecosystem, and what basically pulled you into this space?
That's an interesting question. I always liked investing, and back in 2017, I got a little bit into crypto, but I didn't really study the tech. Lost my money like most people did back in 2017, 2018. And in 2019, I one day just decided to check and see if crypto still existed and Ethereum was still around. And I was like, well, if it survived that crash in 2018, it's probably pretty legitimate tech, right? Because there were still a lot of projects being talked about. I was listening to some podcasts. One of them was Into the Ether, which is long gone now, but that was a great podcast back when it was still around. And I decided to go to one of the conferences. It was ETH Denver back in the day in, I think it was 2020. And I met all the projects. Actually, 1inch was there. I just didn't meet them, but we were next to each other at the hackathon, which is really funny, even though I didn't really know about them yet. And I just saw so much excitement and energy and passion in this ecosystem that looked like it had died 2 years earlier, and it clearly wasn't dead. And I was like, yeah, there's probably something here more. And so I just started researching it and getting involved, and then eventually ended up working in the space. And now I've been here like five or 6 years.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it started with podcasts and going to one of the conferences, I guess, is really where it all started.
Which one's the first conference you went to, by the way?
It was ETH Denver. Yeah, ETH Denver in 2020.
ETH Denver?
I think so.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was right before COVID. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy to think how small the ecosystem was back then, but the energy was insane. It was very cool.
That's awesome. I think it's the same way to how I kind of fell in love with the industry. But yeah. Okay, so taking this into the industry. So how did you actually start your way in the industry? And I have a fun fact that I found, so I can share this as well.
So how did I start in the Web3 industry? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically, what was your journey in the space? Like you told us how you got into it, but like, what did you do until now in the space? What are the different roles? And yeah, if you can share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So my origin story of how I ended up working in the space, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically, yes. And how did you get to this role in 1inch as well?
Oh, this role. Okay.
What did you do before?
Yeah, so I had just been like a keyboard warrior on Twitter and Reddit and stuff, just in all of the different cryptocurrency forums. And eventually I got in contact with 1inch, and they said, hey, do you want to actually help build out our governance process? And do you want to help work with our community? And at the time, I wasn't really sure, because they still seemed kind of small to me at the time, which I guess they were small compared to how big we are now. But I decided to give it a chance, and I liked the team, and yeah, I just kind of kept working on it. I didn't actually start out in the engineering position here, and then I moved into engineering, and now I'm kind of more back on the community side. So I've actually worn a lot of hats at 1inch over the years, which has been a lot of fun.
That's super cool. Okay, so what is you kind of touched it, but like, what is your favorite thing about what you do today? You went from engineers to head of DevRel, and like, yeah, what did you like most so far?
Mixing the tech with community is something that never existed in my previous Web2 jobs. So actually getting to meet with people and talk with people and have like a lot of really technical discussions and, I don't know, theoretical discussions about the future of blockchains and cryptocurrency. I never thought I'd enjoy talking to people as much as I do. And in Web2, when you're an engineer, you just kind of like sit in the cubicle at your 9 to 5, and like you like your team, but you don't really meet other people. And now I've met people from all over the world, like every walk of life. Yeah, it's been a crazy social journey, which is something I never thought I would enjoy as much as I did. And being able to mix that with my technical background, I feel pretty lucky. It's a pretty unique experience. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. And crypto is so diverse. You meet people like from all over the place.
Yeah. I didn't realize how bad my geography was until I started traveling all these different places, and now I have a much better view of the world, I think.
That's nice. Okay, so what's next? What excites you about the space right now? What you're expecting to come already or happen in the space?
It's kind of a loaded question, because AI has sucked so much of the enthusiasm out of crypto. I'm hopeful that there's some sort of cross between like agents and storing value on chain. I would like to see something kind of get people back excited about the crypto ecosystem. I think we're in kind of a lull right now, but I still believe in the long-term vision. And as you can see, like 1inch is still shipping products, like people are still here. The conferences are definitely less busy, but there's still people who are building. And so I'm hoping that we kind of like survive this kind of lower energy era of crypto, and we kind of get back into building. I still would like to see DeFi do really well. Again, DeFi is also kind of going a little bit slower these days. So yeah, I would say it's a tough time for crypto, actually. It's it's a
Yeah,
tough. I mean,
it's
all
one
the
of the
funding.
hardest bear markets, I think. But
Yeah, I mean, we've really been feeling the bear market this time for
yeah,
sure.
but I think the next bull is gonna be awesome. So
Yeah, I haven't given up. I haven't given up. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people are doing the AI, but I haven't given up just yet. I still think there's a lot of people.
At least from my narrow perspective, I'm seeing so many different people still building awesome things and working on like actual tech, which is a really good sign, at least in a bear market for me.
Yeah, we're still
So
going to hackathons, and we're meeting like a lot of really young people who are still like trying to build really cool things. And so I think the most encouraging thing is still that there is talent in the ecosystem. They're still coming, they're still showing up, they're still trying to build, and we're still having a lot of interesting conversations. Yeah. So I don't think the industry is giving up just yet, and that makes me pretty happy.
Yeah, we can stay optimists. That's good. Okay, next one is I would like to ask you to share some maybe mistakes or things that you think developers, builders should try and avoid. And yeah, anything that you think of value for builders and developers in the audience that you would like to share.
Interesting. To what to avoid? I don't really have a good answer of what to avoid. The one advice that I think is really good is that for people who haven't built something yet, don't worry about building the perfect product the first time. Just start building. Because a lot of people, like, they don't start building smart contracts or a project until they think it's the perfect idea, but you're kind of missing out on all the learnings that you can have by just building something, even if it's like a copy of something else, like just make something so that you get your mind in the right set to be creative and to try to create projects and create something cool. And don't worry so much about it being the perfect thing that's going to get you a $5 million seed round on the first try.
Awesome. Great advice. Next, two last questions, and then we'll get back to a few questions from the audience. I see EA Foggy asked you good questions as well, so we'll give him the space again. But I'll finish with my questions first. So, what do you think is still missing in the industry today, and that you're hoping it's going to change in the next 5 years or so?
What do I think is missing in the industry today? I don't have a good answer for that, actually. Yeah.
Okay, that's acceptable.
Maybe I can hand the mic to you on this one.
No worries. So the last question from me is basically if you have any last tips or advice that you would like to share, something that you learned along the way, any smart words from a mentor you would like to share here, maybe a good source for information that really helped you. Yeah.
I would just say if you're a builder in the space, join a hackathon. They're really fun. There's a lot of bounties and prizes that people can earn by building things on top of whatever projects are there. It's a great way to get involved in the ecosystem. That's probably my best advice.
Yeah, I like it. It's very committing as well. It helps ADHD people like me do good things. So I can encourage that that advice at least.
Yeah.
So back to the last question from the audience, and then and then you can leave. It's okay. So a suggestion from EA4E. Check balances against all commitments for a user every time they make a new commitment. Otherwise, they can commit the same capital multiple times. I hope you understand it better than I do, because I'm not sure I do.
Well, the point of Aqua is that you can commit the same capital multiple times, and then if the trade for some reason can't go through, then it gets reverted. But there's no limits to how much you can actually commit to the Aqua ecosystem. But I guess there might be some sort of denial of service vector with that. I'll have to think about that. Oh, there's more.
Okay. Yeah, he continued on this part as well. He gave him example. So
commit ETH, swap ETH.
Does it make more sense now?
The commitments are only acted on at runtime, so it doesn't really matter what your balances are when you make the commitments, or if it's before or after a swap. All that matters is the balances at the time of the swap. So I don't think the ordering of these swaps and commitments really matters. It's just if the wallets can actually fulfill the trades at the moment that they're executed. But maybe I'm not understanding your question correctly.
So if not, I invite you, EA Froggy, to our group and try to ask more questions there. You can reach that through the link above in our website. It's easy to find. And we would love to have the conversation there continue. He just answered on the comments as well, so I'll bring it here. It's related to a denial of service type attack. Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought of that very much yet, but it's a good point. I'll have to think about that more.
Awesome. As I said, the Telegram group is the best place for brainstorming together. We would love to have you there, man. Okay, so I'll take the time to basically just thank you, Tanner. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was a great discussion.
Yeah, so thank you so much for answering all those questions. Yeah, basically it was fascinating. And I thank everyone who joined us and asked so many questions and got involved. It's really fun to see all the involvement from the community. And see you next time. And I have a few closing words, but Tanner, thank you again. It was awesome, and see you next time.
Thanks. See you guys.
So to everyone who stayed until now, I would like to thank you all for joining and participating. If you liked our content and would like to support us, please join our Telegram and share this with your friends or colleagues that you think might be interested in our technical content. If they're entrepreneurs in the space, if they're developers, builders, this is the place for them. And we're here to help you guys with learning from the best, connecting, and even hiring. And we would love your support and feedback on anything that we do. The community is open. We're an open source community, so feel free to express your opinions. We would really appreciate it. And I can personally promise to try and read all the feedback that we're getting from you. If you want to take an active part in the community in any way, please speak to any of the community managers. You can find all of us in the new website. Please let us know and reach out through Telegram or the website itself or through the email. We would love to hear from you. And for those listening for the first time, we are the Web3 Devs Underground. We're all about top technical content, open source, and zero shilling. And all done by builders for builders. So everything we do is always free, reliable, and for the community. We encourage you to follow and subscribe to all our platforms. And on the event calendar, you can see the next few events that we're planning. They're going to be amazing. To those of you here in Israel, we would love to see you in person. We have a huge event in Tel Aviv soon, and few great announcements that we would love to make. So hope to see you there. And yeah, see you next time, guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye for now.